Chapter 19. Growing Up the Hard Way. Once again, the occupation forces stepped in to disrupt our lives. For one day, they ordered us out of our school on the hill within 48 hours. The commanding officer announced the news with a grim, disillusioned face and instructed us to assist the young teaching officers to remove all the furniture into the gardens. Then he stumped away from us, for he was going to Istanbul to thresh the matter out with authorities. We worked all through that long summer day. The heat was intense as we staggered beneath tables and chairs and bunks and mattresses. Towards early evening, we broke off to eat a hurried meal, then continued working well into the night by the light of oil lamps strung from the trees at intervals. Once an officer stopped me as I stumbled beneath the weight of a bed. He ordered me to find somewhere to rest. I dragged out a mattress from beneath a pile and searched for my brother. I found him under a tree, already half asleep on the hard ground. When I called to him, he obediently rolled himself onto the mattress and slept in an instant. The next morning my back was painful, and I asked Mehmet to examine it. He found a great red wheal running across it, and my vest had stuck to the dried blood, for I had probably injured myself when I was hauling beds across the garden. Mehmet bathed the wound for me in one of the wash houses, but it was so painful that I had the greatest difficulty in walking upright. There was nothing for us to do that day, for the school was now stripped and all the furniture lay out in the garden. Mehmet and I went and sat on a low wall which overlooked the Bosphor. Down here, in this part of the garden, it was very quiet. My back still ached, so I pulled off my jacket and vest and lay face downwards on the grass, facing the sea with my back exposed to the healing rays of the brilliant sun. I lay and watched the blue Bosphor and the little passing boats, and my thoughts travelled with the boats and ran on ahead of the big ships that were sailing to some unknown place. I forgot the discomfort of my back, or that I lay here in the school gardens, and I thought instead of the many pictures I had seen of foreign lands, of brown-skinned races speaking a language I did not know. In imagination, I saw great, swarthy stevedores unloading ships in a port I would never see, and smelled the soft, aromatic perfume of spices and the warm scent of bananas. My stomach ached with hunger, and my heart with nostalgia, for I knew not what. Mehmet looked drowsily out to sea and said in a contented voice, "When I grow up, I shall be a sailor." "But I thought you wanted to be a doctor," I replied, and he hesitated a moment or two, trying to reconcile the two things. Then he said triumphantly, "But I can be a doctor in a ship." Strangely enough, he never faltered in his determination. I stumbled through life never knowing what it was I really wanted, only conscious that it was always just out of reach around some corner. I forget exactly how old I was when I discovered that I should never make a good officer, but it was sometime in childhood. All that morning, Mehmet and I lay on the sun-drenched grass, and when finally a bugle called us to the midday meal, we found our dining room under the shady trees. Whilst we ate, wasps and bees buzzed about us, and earwigs sometimes dropped into our plates. The officers looked tired and dispirited, their shoulders sagging under their ancient uniforms, and when we had all eaten, there was nothing for anyone to do except to wait. The school lay empty under the afternoon sun. That evening the commanding officer returned from Istanbul with the good news that we were to stay in our school after all, so all the things had to be moved back again. Those summer days of 1920 were filled with the now familiar name of Mustafa Kemal. He had become our national hero and gained in lustre when we heard that the Sultan had put a price on his head. Lessons were difficult for me. I could not concentrate when I could watch instead the shimmering blue haze on the grass and how the shadows crept out from under the trees as the sun moved along the sky. Suddenly a teacher would rap out my name, and I would return from my trance-like staring at the garden to stand up dazedly, wondering what it was I had been asked. We had readings from the Koran every morning, and as this was the first lesson of the day, we usually all started off in good humour. All we had to do was listen. But later on our teacher decided to give us religious music, and that startled us so considerably, for the idea of standing up in public to sing solo was more than we could contemplate. The imam who taught us religion was very fat, with a very large bushy beard, a green sarnik or turban, and a loose black robe that almost touched the ground. We used to call him Yesil Sharikia, the man with the green turban. And although we profoundly disliked him, we're at the same time very proud of him, because any imam permitted to wear a green sarik is supposed to be directly descendant from Muhammad. We disliked him because he was sensual and carnal, and would call one of us to his desk on the dais, pinch our cheeks or our lips with his forefinger and thumb, then put his fingers to his long nose to ecstatically smell whatever perfume we exuded. More often than not, it would be of pilav or potatoes or fruit stains would linger at the corner of our lips, and he would roguishly wag his beard, saying, "Some naughty boy has not washed his mouth after eating." He had a high falsetto voice like a woman's. We did what we liked with him, for he was no disciplinarian and never complained about us. Mehmed and I used to go home every week. We enjoyed these excursions into the outer world, feeling very important on the boat in our precious green uniforms. We would tear into the little house in Bayezid, disturbing the peace with our ribald shouts and our never-failing habit of reducing Muaze to tears after the first 5 minutes. My mother had at last been persuaded to turn the downstairs room into a workroom, my grandmother now occupying the room which had formerly belonged to Mehmed and me. In consequence, at weekends, Mehmed and I were given camp beds to sleep on, and we were forever in danger of stabbing ourselves in vital places with the needles left so carelessly lying about. It was nothing to discover a needle in one's bed, or to step on one with bare feet in the early mornings or last thing at night. Friday morning, the Muslim Sunday of those days, would see us lazily out of bed, rejoicing in the undisciplined atmosphere of home. Yet towards evening, we would be glad enough to return to the more masculine atmosphere of Kulalai, meeting our friends on the boat and walking together along the dusty sea road to school. I learned how to be a soldier. I and all of my generation learned the hard way, schooled severely by war-experienced, impatient, frequently cruel officers. We learned how to stand for a long time without moving a muscle of our faces or flickering an eyelid. We learned not to cry out, not to flinch when an officer slapped our cheeks with a sound like doom. We learned too, at 10 or 11 years old, to keep our tears inside us, for the fear of further punishment was usually greater than our immediate pain. At first, our spurting tears were commonplace until held up to public contempt. "Are you not ashamed to cry like a woman?" an officer would sneer bitingly. We learned to jump to attention on the word, not let our rigid hands restlessly wander from our sides. We learned how to open our palms to the sky and accept the sting of the cutting stick without betraying emotion. We learned how to be good soldiers, and if many of us later on meted out much the same sort of punishment to the soldiers in our command, who could altogether blame us for our lack of imagination? We were taught that a good soldier needs no imagination, no feelings of humanity. During my 14th year, I became imbued with the spirit of piety. I spent so much time praying in the mosques that my lessons suffered, and the craze I had developed for football receded into the background. I would relentlessly flog myself to daily prayers. I became so holy, so priggish, that my mother viewed this with alarm and looked about for other things to distract my attention. She, who had never been holy in her life, regarded such excessive sanctity as unnatural, but my grandmother and the school's imam encouraged my fever. My delighted grandmother even prophesied to the Bayezid neighbours that I would end my days as a holy man. But too much religion began to affect my nerves and my health, for I rose from my bed for prayers before dawn and slept late each night because of night praying. I became pale and thin as a rake, but prayed fervently, no longer remaining in bed at the weekends. I would visit the Bayezid Mosque, and today, when I see the Bayezid Mosque standing in its tranquil gardens, I see the fanatical child who had leaped indecorously through its portals, each to fling himself down and commune with his God. Sometimes Sultan Mechid would dazzle my eyes when he attended at Bayezid for prayers. I would watch him enthralled, his fine, good-looking old face, his bushy white beard, the red fez adding colour to the funeral black of his dress. The band would play loudly in the Soldiers' March, and Sultan Mejid would bow from his coach. First to this side he would bow, then to that, and the cheers would hoarsely rend the air. The old Sultan would stretch his lips into a wider smile of acknowledgement, putting his hand gracefully to his scarlet fez.